So first of all, my name is Sagir Sheikh. I am honored to be moderating this session, a very important session with the title of Right to Self-Determination, which basically is one of the top advocacy campaign we run under the platform of World Sindhi Congress. I am based in San Diego, California, and I am the US organizer for the WSC chapter. Today we have a wonderful three speakers who have dedicated their life in either research or writing or learning about the right to self-determination. We have Mr. Kambar Baloch, he's from Baloch Human Rights Council, UK. And then we have Dr. Nakku Lohano, Secretary General, World Sindhi Congress. And finally, Professor Fiona McConnell from Oxford University. So the way panel, I want to just say that I will request all three speakers to have some position statement, 5 to 7 minutes. And then at the end, I have some few questions, and I'm sure once they present their position statement, we will have some more questions. And if time allows us, we will open to the participants to do. So let me just introduce Mr. Kambar Baloch, who is going to be our first speaker today. A dedicated Pakistani journalist, or Baloch journalist, I'd rather say, Kambar Baloch has made waves with his investigative reports on diverse topics, notably including the Baloch struggle. His writings have garnered international attention, emphasizing his unwavering commitment to truth and transparency in challenging the journalistic landscape, and especially highlighting the atrocity in Balochistan and struggle of Balochistan, as well as struggle in Sindh and other human rights issues. So, Kambar Baloch, may I invite you to please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sari. And I'm very grateful to World Sindhi Congress for this opportunity and for this beautiful address. The right to self-determination is the right to freely determine people's political status and to freely pursue their social, cultural, and political developmental agendas. The Baloch being one of the oppressed nations in the world have been struggling to exercise the right to self-determination and to have it recognized for the last over 7 decades. To set some background information for those of you who are not very familiar with Balochistan, where the Baloch people are from, Balochistan today straddles into 3 countries, mainly Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, with the largest part of it being under the Pakistan control, which will also be the focus of my talk today. Pakistan, as we know, that is a multi-ethnic state with the major or the dominant ethnic group being the Punjabi. In order to maintain their economic and political supremacy, the major ethnic group in Pakistan have consistently denied or disregarded the social, cultural, economic, and political existence of the oppressed nations, including the Sindhis and the Baloch. For the Baloch, they have, throughout this time, have voiced their concerns and have invited the ruling authorities for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. But as we also know that Pakistan is a country that is being run by the military. So rather than giving legitimacy to the struggle of the Baloch people or to come up with a political resolution, the military has always come up with a military response, which has resulted in the violation of human rights and humanitarian laws in Balochistan. So the Baloch believe that their existence is in their right to self-determination being recognized. Because when we talk about the human rights violations and the violations of humanitarian laws in Balochistan, there is lack of political will in Pakistan to resolve the Baloch conflict. And similarly, the judiciary in Pakistan has failed to provide a remedy. Therefore, the Baloch believe that in order to survive, their cultural, social, political, and national existence should be recognized, and they should be free to determine their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amar Baloch. With review to our next speaker, Dr. Lakhu Lohano of World Sindhi Congress. You all know him very well. He is the deacon of World Sindhi Congress. He is Secretary General and also a very active in United Nations activities. He has represented cities all over the world in different forums, including India, Geneva, Germany, France, Belgium, and the United States. He has done tons of presentations on the right to self-determination and other human rights issues related to Sindh as well as to Balochistan. So I invite Dr. Lakhu Lohano to present his position statement.
Thank you, Salim, and thank you all. Although the term right to self-determination has been very, very widely used, but I think it's necessary that I should once again recap it. So, self-determination denotes the legal right of people to decide their own destiny in the international order. Self-determination is a core principle of international law and enshrined in a number of international treaties, for example, protected in the United Nations Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as the right of all people. Now, what does self-determination mean? I know you all are learned, but let me once again repeat. By virtue of this right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. When you go into the discourse, what it meant to say or clearly say that without you determine freely, you are able to determine freely your political status, you cannot pursue. It's not possible. You cannot pursue. Why we need to determine our free political status? Why? Now, the only way, because people live, people survive, people make communities, people make nations, because without you determining freely your political status, it is not possible to pursue freely your social, your economic, and your cultural development. That's not possible. Okay, so what is our experience of Sindhi people of last 76 years? Sindh has been in a political setup, regardless we won't go to a political setup which is called Pakistan for last 76 years. And what is our experience? As soon as it came into existence, 20% of Sindhi's population was coerced to leave. And Sindhi cities, they become alien to Sindhi people within months. All these properties and lands, all that. Even in Karachi, which is the capital, before it was snatched by the center, Sindhi medium schools were shut. The only university in Sindh that was Sindh University in Karachi that was closed. Partition was one of the most traumatic events in the history of the subcontinent. But to be honest, this didn't happen. There was, say, for example, hundreds of thousands of people died in Punjab on either side of Bengal and other areas. But this type of injustice and the impacts that went for decades and continue to haunt us never happened in any other part of the subcontinent. And then, in these 76 years, what happened to us? We lost almost 40% of our lands, most taken over by army, in either agriculture. Even day before yesterday, there was this news that army is acquiring 43,600 acres of land. Couple of weeks ago, there was this news that military has identified 1.3 million acres of land for corporate farming. For example, just imagine the apathy that the Indus Delta that was built over 20 million years, that is destroyed. Karunjar, that is 4 billion years old, they start cutting it, and they go backward and forward. I don't know how long we stop it. The change in demography that has taken place in Sindh, just you go to it, think about it. Has it happened in any other part of Pakistan? Has it happened in any other part of subcontinent? Has it happened in any other part of South Asia? Has it happened in any other part of Asia? Nothing. The way that democracy, we at the time of partition, we were anywhere, depending how you work it out, we were anywhere between 82 to 89%. Now, to be honest, we don't know, but they say you are about 62%. That doesn't happen. And so, every do, the social development, the culture, even after 76 years, Sindhi language is not a national language. Even Sindhis are not a nation, Balochs are not a nation, Punjabis are not a nation. Just imagine. So, we are in a very, very difficult situation. And what is the impact of these old policies? It is, we are not even part, forget about 1940 resolution, forget about confederation, we are not even a federation. It is a colonial state run by no one, but by the army. You have seen. Do you know, you all are learned people, you get know what has happened in Pakistan. Is there any other institution? Is there a parliament? Is there a judiciary? Is there the media? There's no one. And see, for example, they said there were 8 million Sindhi people who become homeless, not affected 22 million. None of this has been rehabilitated. They destroyed homes. They say 7 million children, Sindhi children under the age of 10, they say that the official they're out of education. 7 million children. But these are not including the other millions who are in the schools, but these schools don't exist. They slowly, and this is honestly exactly, because according to the definition of genocide, of UN definition, the first clause is that if there's a large scale killing of any group, national, ethnic, racial, religious, or the second clause is that if the conditions of life are created that causes large scale destruction, disease, and that is happening. My own sin is crying, is suffering, is in pain. And that's the situation. Now, so what should we do? We talk a lot about our past. We say Monaco was 5,000 years old, but Sindhi nation, Sindhi people didn't descend only 5,000 years ago. They should have been thousands of years back over the road here. There are human settlements which is 25,000 years old. Now, and we have reached to a point in history. Do we want to survive as a nation, as people, or not? And if we want to, and if we want to, there's only one way. This is the unanimous consensus that people, they cannot make meaningful real, genuine, social, economic, cultural progress without the right to self-determination. And therefore, for us, Sindhis, this is the question for us, for the three generations that we currently inheriting and for our thousands of generations to survive as a people or not. And it is really very, very important for all who believe, who have organizations, political, semi-political, cultural. This is the question of survival. Together, we can find the solutions. We have done it in the past, and moreover, as this state, because it never has a base, economic base and all that, it is crumbling, and as it is crumbling, it is becoming more aggressive, more ruthless, and more occupied. Therefore, for us, this is the time. We have to sit together. We don't have the quick solutions, but together, if we sit and we are serious, and we put our all efforts and minds, we can do it, and we have to do it if we want to survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pulano. It is a passionate appeal about the Sindhis' need for right to self-determination. And now I am proud to request Professor Fiona McConnell, who is an eminent professor of political geography at St. Catherine's College, University of Oxford. Professor McConnell's research dives deep into the realms of stateless communities and the complexities of political space. With her work cited over 2,000 times, she actively engages in the public discussions on statelessness and political geography. Among her accolades, the Black Award from the Royal Geographical Society stand testament to her influence and contribution. Lastly, I must mention her involvement with the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization is amazing contribution. So I'm proud to have Ms. Montano here.
Thank you. Many thanks. Many thanks for the invitation to join me today. It's a real honour. I've been asked to give a bit of an overview of the right to self-determination within international law and international forums, some of the challenges that states communities are facing in claiming that right, and then also some opportunities that seem to be emerging for rethinking the right to self-determination and claiming it in the international arena. So as my esteemed colleagues have said, the notion of self-determination, we can trace it back to Enlightenment thinking, where Western political philosophers saw consent as necessary for legitimate rule. And then we can see the formalization of that right, with the League of Nations formalizing it as belonging or applying to a people. And then it was enshrined as a right in international law with its inclusion in Chapter 1 of the UN's Charter. The right then featured in a resolution and two declarations at the UN in 1960 and 1970. But crucially, declarations are not binding, right? Their implementation depends on the discretion of states, but those declarations did important work in setting the discursive context for the scope and content of self-determination. And of course, if we're thinking of the 1960s and 1970s, this was the context of decolonisation. The legal standing of the right to self-determination then became bolstered by its inclusion in Article 1 of two really core human rights treaties, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So it appears in Article 1 of both of those treaties. This effectively turns self-determination into a general principle of international law. So if we look at the text of those covenants, it's clear that that right is not limited to colonies, but as was about international law, the fact that the right lacks a clear definition and that states really fear secession means that self-determination has been continuing to be read through the lens of decolonisation. And until relatively recently, it was read through the lens of what we call saltwater colonisation. So those are situations in which people seeking self-determination live in a distinct overseas territory, conventionally separated from their colonial powers by an ocean. This has started to change within international law. A key turning point was the 2007 UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. And self-determination is the centrepiece of UNDRIP. But it's not, in that declaration, framed as an unqualified right. As Article 46 of UNDRIP states, the declaration should not impinge on, to quote, territorial integrity or political unity of sovereign and independent states. So here again we come up against that barrier of state sovereignty and territorial integrity. So the other kind of restriction I think with UNDRIP is that with the working group on Indigenous peoples, the right was framed primarily according to the experiences of Indigenous peoples in liberal democracies. And this matters because treating this context as if it's universal through enacting it in UNDRIP, it can include issues that face Indigenous peoples in other parts of the world. So for instance, in Western settler colonies, the matter of who is Indigenous and therefore who can claim self-determination under UNDRIP is relatively uncontested. However, in Asia, many state governments declare that there are no Indigenous peoples or that all populations are Indigenous, and therefore trying to claim the right to self-determination as an Indigenous people under UNDRIP creates huge challenges. And I think more generally we've seen a number of challenges facing stateless communities trying to articulate and claim the right to self-determination in the international community. The fear of secession among states is very strong and is arguably growing by the day. So mentioning self-determination in speeches at the UN or discussions with permanent missions can lead to doors being shut. And on top of this, work we've been doing with UNPO is to document the shrinking space for civil society, and particularly for minority communities and stateless nations within the UN. So we've been working to document those challenges in accessing and engaging with UN. And we've published 2 reports on what we've called compromised space. So there we've been speaking to stateless communities and we've been really documenting the blocking tactics that states use, particularly at UN forums. So to prevent communities from getting accreditation, so blocking the application to get ECOSOC status, which is very well documented, but states also preventing representatives of civil society organizations even traveling to Geneva and New York. We've also documented and indeed witnessed state harassment during UN forums. So states very keen to prevent challenges to their own official narratives, particularly on human rights. So this includes interruptions to speeches by representatives of civil society to make spurious points of order, to following delegates around corridors, photographing delegates needing the contents of their bags. And this has also escalated into state reprisals against representatives and their families back home. However, despite these really significant challenges, I think there are increasing opportunities for articulating our right to self-determination at the UN. And I think actually even within the UN system, there are moves in the right direction. 2 years ago in 2021, the expert mechanism on the rights of Indigenous people authored a report on self-determination, and following the adoption of UNDRIP in 2007. And relatedly, we can see the Sustainable Development Goal number 16 on the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies kind of reinvigorating a conversation at the UN around the relationship between self-determination and political participation. And anecdotally, I think we are seeing civil society groups and stateless communities starting to come back to the right to self-determination as a way of resolving protracted conflicts and political stasis, but in articulating it in new and different ways. And this is often being led by youth movements within stateless communities as well. Because as I said, when self-determination is equated with separatism, with secession, doors within diplomacy are usually shut in your face. State diplomats simply do not want to listen. So therefore, I think there's a need to be strategic in how the right to self-determination is viewed in these forums. Different UN agencies simply have different understandings of the right to self-determination. So I think it's important to look beyond the Fourth Committee to other UN bodies and treaties. And to reinforce the relevance of self-determination. So how self-determination links to so many other rights, right? To political, economic, cultural, language, religious, land rights, to name but a few. But also crucially to link self-determination to conflict prevention and to peace building. Again, linking it to Sustainable Development Goal number 16. And just to give you a quick example of this, colleagues and I have been looking at the Forum on Minority Issues held every year at the UN in November in Geneva. Now, it's a limited forum, there's no legally binding treaty on minority issues, but nevertheless, states turn up to this 2-day forum. We've looked back at statements made by minority communities to this forum since its establishment in 2008. Because on paper, you would imagine that self-determination is mentioned much at this forum. Because in international law, self-determination belongs to a people, not a minority. There's a whole set of debates around the relationship between self-determination and minorities. But if you look at the statements, it's not the case. Self-determination is mentioned time and time again. So then we ask the question, well, how are communities talking about self-determination? And they're using it in very specific ways. They're providing evidence of the denial of self-determination and its consequences. They're setting out very clearly their historical claims to and demands for self-determination. They're calling for self-determination in relation to a really wide range of rights, cultural, educational, right to participation in public life, right to natural resources. And crucially, they're articulating the benefits of the realization of self-determination in terms of peace building. So arguing that self-determination movements themselves use peaceful tactics, that the denial of self-determination is a cause of conflict and instability, and that self-determination crucially can be a solution for peace and stability. So throughout the forum sessions then, self-determination is demanded most often as a call for protection as well as greater tolerance, inclusion or autonomy. And in this regard, self-determination can be better understood as a kind of multi-leveled request for recognition and implementation of rights. So then just to wrap up, we need to acknowledge that there's an emerging new world order we've seen come into being in the last few years. And therefore, I think the right to self-determination and claims to it need to reflect that. There's a need for claims to self-determination to be underpinned by coalition building, potentially, to linking it very explicitly to peace and conflict prevention, and holding the international community to account for contemporary practices of colonialism. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor McConnell. So I think my one of the intention today's panel is to further down and pick your more brains of the speakers on some of the notes I've made, because they, after their great position statements where Mr. Kamar Baloch talked about the case for the right to self-determination and freedom of Baloch nation in Pakistan, and Dr. Lakhu presented a passionate plea for the need for right to self-determination for Sindhi nation. And what Ms. McConnell basically gave us a kind of international law background about how it is perceived in the United Nations, and some venues where stateless people such as us can actually pursue through minority forum and so on, and as well as the challenges she described. So I do have a few questions, and if you let me, I think I'll start with Mr. Baloch. That I think the biggest question, especially from as being a Sindhi as well as this moment, is how, Balochs have suffered a lot. Everyone knows it, and not only that, but in terms of the oppression, in terms of like so much violence in the last 60 or 70 years, 4, 5, 6 armed struggle, basically episodes have happened, and one is still going on. How do you see that Baloch struggle towards either has to be like armed resistance versus maybe non-violent struggle, or what are your opinions about it? Because that conflict exists in Sindhi nationalism. We always struggle with that idea. I want to know, as a Baloch, how do you see this?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that violence in Balochistan, there's no denying that there is armed resistance in Balochistan, and that the state authorities in Pakistan have never seriously engaged the Baloch in a serious talk to resolve the Baloch conflict with Pakistan. So there is a section among the Baloch who believe that the military who runs Pakistan only understands the language that it itself speaks. But nonetheless, this bloody conflict in Balochistan needs a peaceful resolution. And this will result in more deaths of Baloch and also of Pakistanis. So we believe the only peaceful resolution of this bloody conflict is for the UN to hold a referendum in Balochistan to allow the people of Balochistan to freely determine their future.
Yeah, and I think I want to sort of lead a similar question to Dr. Lohano. So, I mean, being me also part of World Sindhi Congress, we, on the other spectrum, educate non-violent struggle for Sindhi nation, but of course aim goal is same as Baloch nation, which is right to self-determination. I want you to describe more how World Sindhi Congress perceives that how would we get, progress towards the right to self-determination, while Mr. Kambar has said that the Pakistani states seem to be resort to violence. And as a hegemonic and imperialistic power, almost determines the way struggle is done. Because if they exert oppression and torture and militarization, then of course people are going to rise up. So how do you see this whole play for the Sindhi people, Sindhi nation?
Now, first, how World Sindhi Congress perceives the right to self-determination. Because if you go to any of our literature, the first objective, first principle that World Sindhi Congress stands with is the right to self-determination. Because we honestly believe that without we regaining our right to self-determination, there is no way forward. And that is what our experience of 76 years have demonstrated. Now, how to go forward to achieve this? Now, number one, all the national struggles are long struggles. And particularly in the current situation we are in, because the entire state has created a narrative, and that narrative is so crushing that even people will think twice to talk about right to self-determination. And sometimes our minds, even educated minds, are so brainwashed, because there is a term called social engineering. They have engineered the mindset of the society that rather than being active to coming out of difficulties, pain, suffering, and sorrows, they go on the peripheral areas but do not go on the root cause. And therefore, there are two ways. Number one, any national struggle is a multifaceted, multi-directional struggle. In the world that we live, nothing is isolated. Whatever is happening in the world literally impacts everyone to lesser or greater impact. And the world is not an easy place. It's quite difficult. Nations, interests, blocs, strategies, geostrategic positions, and We cannot change that situation, we are in that situation. Therefore, first, one of the front for our right to self-determination is give this recognition that number one, even within our sections, this idea is becoming blurred that Sindhis are a nation. How many will say Sindhis are a nation and Pakistan is not a nation, to be honest? By all, forget about any political differences. Pakistan is not a nation, Sindhis are a nation. But how many will be ready to say this statement? So first and foremost, two-way struggle that on the international front, it should be recognized that Sindhis are a nation, number one. Number two, Sindhis are facing one of the first worst colonial operations. It is resources, it is demography, it is education, it is health, it is coastal areas, it is towns, it is jobs. Everything is being taken away, and they need to understand. Secondly, it is important that first and foremost, our people should understand this. There is a verse, Marin Mariskan ki Marin Munjabuyas. How many are clear among us that we are a nation, we are a people, we are the land that everyone should be proud of. And so we have to work on these two fronts within our resources. Honestly, I'm so proud and I'm so lucky to have people like them. Rubina, Saveer, Farhan, Gul, Hidayat, Hafiza. They're great people, honestly. Hajan, really proud. But still, remember, it is a long, long, long way. But as I said, Sado de data ubaji kare, Sado de data ubaji kare, Lakhe Idaja Chand Ogri Pora.
So along the same lines, I have a question for Professor McConnell. I had actually privileged to read that report you guys wrote about the space, shrinking spaces in United Nations. So it's obvious that United Nations is totally obsessed with the state structure, right? So stateless people like Sindhis and Baloch have very little space, and even actually that space itself is shrinking too, which you also, mentioned in your report too. So what avenues are left for us? I know it's a difficult question, but we'd like to hear at least something from you.
That's the key question. That's the key question.
Yes. What is left for us?
It is a good question. I think, yes, we've documented the shrinking of space and challenges. But I think running at the same time, the UN, certainly in its rhetoric, is wanting to be more inclusive, to include a plurality of voices. That is certainly what you see in terms of all the official statements. So there's a disconnect between the rhetoric and reality. So holding the UN to account in terms of what it says. But at the end of the day, the UN is underfunded and overstretched. So it's states who have power. Another way of looking at the situation we have at the moment, with multiple geopolitical crises happening, is that crises can be windows of opportunity as well. In terms of new alliances, people might be more receptive to other voices, particularly around seemingly intractable issues. So there is certainly an argument that this is a moment actually to think strategically around how the claim to self-determination is made. And I think again, what we've been doing with the NPO is thinking across different movements and nations and communities can also be really powerful. States are more receptive to hearing voices in multiple. And that might be regional coalitions, but it also might be coalitions between communities that previously haven't sat down beside each other, but are facing the same issues on the ground, whether it's land grabs or language rights or like. So coming together to lobby, to do advocacy around the right to self-determination across coalitions of communities can be really powerful in getting voices heard.
A very great segue to my probably last round of questions. We do have to wrap up this very, of course, insightful panel. I think both I will ask Kambar and Lakhu to make short statements about two things and in their own voices, of course. I think as Ms. Fiona mentioned, this is the best course and this is a great time to build coalitions. And I think Sindhi and Baloch, though, have historically shown it again and again that we are brothers and sisters, basically. But I want to hear a little bit more about what more can be done on building that coalition between Sindhis and Baloch nations. Mr. Kambar?
Well, what we, in particular the Balochistanaffairs Rights Council, the World Sindhi Congress, and also colleagues in the Baloch National Movement, we have been doing here, particularly in the UK and in Geneva, that we share forums with each other, we facilitate each other, and we share stages, we invite each other to our events to share our sufferings to each other's audience, to raise awareness among our people. So, but the actual ground where the struggle is happening is Sindh and Balochistan. There is a need of such engagements there, and what we can do, which as the World Sindhi Congress in Vienna, is to help in creating such an environment in Sindh and Balochistan where our youth or particularly the political activists could come closer to each other. Because this will, we are in a situation that we cannot make it all alone. We need each other. And the need is felt more in Sindh and Balochistan rather than here in the UK. That's what I was thinking.
Thank you. I do echo, and my own political sort of a journey has concluded, and again that I do believe that Baloch's destination is tied to Sindh nation's struggle, and vice versa. Sindhi nation's struggle is tied to Baloch, our destiny is tied to Baloch's struggle too. So, Lakhu, what do you want to add to it? Sorry, because the time like you.
I think I completely agree with both of you, because this was our clear understanding that destinies, this is for a lot of reasons, geographical, historical, cultural, and of course the suffering is the common denominator, that the destinies of Sindhis and Baloch nations are intertwined. And therefore, we realized this 25 years ago when Saint Atalla Bengal was here, when Sheikh Balaj Mari was here, and Adi Amreen, Adi Rubina, Sagir, and all these friends, honestly, when the history will be written, the name of these people will definitely be written. They did a monumental job. We realized 25 years ago, we established Sindhi Baloch Forum. And since then, like any human relation, and all these organic relations, they grow with time and interaction. The relationship between Sindhi and Baloch nation over that 35-year period has matured. Now, every year we go together and we support each other and all that. But as Kambar mentioned, he took my words, that this is not being reflected on the ground, because the only real Sindhi Baloch unity exists here and not at the ground. And this is one of the reasons as well, because as the policies and of the state, they always try to divide and further divide and further divide and divide. Even within Sindh, they use 100 fractures to divide societies in the name of caste and tribes, and kabilas and religions, ethnicities, geographical layers, south, upper. They use everything to divide. And that they are using there. And this is probably number one, even to here we should reach out more effectively and wider. So rather than only going each other's these events and protests, we should probably reach out together. And there are a number of venues where we could go. I remember once we went to the European Commission, and together as Balochs and Sindhis, the next day, the European Commission issued a statement that the enforced disappearances is inhumane. The enforced disappearances in Pakistan is an inhumane practice in Pakistan, and that European Union demands it to stop. So that was in a small way. So we should reach out more widely. We should engage, although the political parties at the ground, they are under a lot of pressure. I mean, they know their limits. They have been given circles that don't go beyond that. And those who go, they have seen their consequences. But it's still on a smaller scale, on a basic scale, there's a possibility, and I think the Sindhi Baloch Forum, the ENM, BHRC, and World Sindhi Congress can play their role and should play their role. Thank you.
Thank you. So guys, I'm sorry we do have to wrap it up. We have wonderful